Welcome to In Session Taking Back Control. This podcast contains discussions on topics related to mental health, which may include sensitive and potentially triggering information regarding violence, abuse, addictions, and other mental health conditions. The experiences shared by our guests are personal and represent their individual perspectives. They have voluntarily agreed to share their stories with the aim of fostering understanding and awareness. The content of this podcast is intended for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered professional advice. It is not a substitute for seeking professional help, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult a qualified mental health professional for any concerns or questions related to your health and well-being. Listener discretion is advised. If you find any content distressing, we encourage you to pause the episode and seek support from a trusted individual or a mental health professional. Thank you for listening to In Session Taking Back Control, and we hope that the conversations that we share contribute to a deeper understanding of mental health. Well, hi Jasmine, and just want to say thanks for joining me in session and taking back control. I appreciate you coming on today, and I know you're not in country, so you've accommodated times to be here. So just before we get started, do you want to just take a wee opportunity for anybody that doesn't know you or hasn't heard about you through LinkedIn, which I imagine would be slightly impossible? Just tell us a wee bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm Jasmine. I'm a health coach and I specialize in helping people with their gut health. So I've been doing that now it's actually 2 years since I've been full-time in business. I started that a couple of years before that, but I used to be a chartered accountant. I worked in the corporate world, really enjoyed it actually, but I actually was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. That's why I got into health coaching. So I got that diagnosis when I was 30, and that really just put me down a path of like self-healing and what I could do to like fix myself, looking into different alternative methods, because basically the prognosis from the doctor wasn't exactly fun to sit on. It was like, it's a degenerative disease, like it's only going to get worse. It's basically just a case of pain management and trying to slow the progression of it. And you do that through pretty strong drugs, which don't come without side effects. So I really wanted to try and not have that outcome and not have a situation like what he said where I wouldn't be able to go and hike, and that eventually I would need to get operations on my joints and that they'd probably have to lock those up and that I wouldn't be able to be active anymore. And basically at the time, like, that was my identity. So I was like, who is Jasmine if she can't go run or go to the gym or go and spend weekends on the hills? So I really just wanted to avoid it and do whatever I could to just basically take control of the situation rather than leave it up to somebody else. So that, yeah, like I said, just put me on a path of going down so many different rabbit holes and trying to figure out so many different ways to improve my health, because I thought I was pretty healthy at the time too. Like, that diagnosis felt like just came from nowhere. I wasn't expecting it at all, but turns out that aesthetics don't really equate to health. So you might be petite, you might look fit because you're running and you're going to the gym or whatever, but it doesn't mean that what's inside is happy and healthy, which wasn't the case for me at the time and led to a diagnosis. But eventually I tried so many different things and they started to work. I started to see improvements in my health. I started to feel better. The pain started to go away. And so then I got told that I was in remission. And then it just made me really think that I wasn't going to be the only person that was in that situation where they were being told what their future looked like, where they were being told that this is the only option. And like, I've been there in the past where I would have said, okay, fine, like, give me whatever prescription, tell me what I need to do, like, let's just go with that. So that really just completely changed the trajectory of my life, really. And I'm so grateful for the diagnosis and for everything that I went through with that too, and the pain that I experienced, because it made me want to help other people, to like say like this doesn't have to be the way it is, like help empower people to take responsibility and to take the control back within themselves, and just know that there is an alternative option and that you can feel better. So that's how I didn't even know that health coaching was a thing. I had absolutely no idea, but that, yeah, got me to where I am now. And then, so I started the business while I was still working full time, and then something had to give, and it wasn't going to be a future filled with monthly budgets.
So you took the leap. You took a leap into the health industry.
I took the leap and started working with amazing clients, and I haven't looked back. It's so fulfilling. It just makes my heart smile every day, and just really fills me with so much joy. Like I really feel like I found my purpose. And like I said, I didn't dislike accounting. I quite liked my job, and I loved the company and the people that I worked with, but there was no fire there. Whereas now, like, I get so excited about my work, and yeah, I just love what I do. I love that I get to wake up in the morning and help people.
And you can hear a real passion for it in you, Jasmine, because I follow you on LinkedIn. I see a lot of the stuff that you post, and there's a real passion for well-being in everything that you do, everything that you talk about, and it's obviously been fueled by something quite traumatic, it sounded like. So at the age of 30 and feeling fit and healthy, and so what was it like? Just, I suppose, I know you're thankful that you were diagnosed, but in that moment in time, young, fit, healthy, climbing hills, how did that feel to get that diagnosis?
It was a complete blow. Like I said, like my identity was that, like that's who Jasmine was. And so being told that, like, it literally just got taken away from me in a phone call, and it was a massive blow. Like I can't say that I didn't like go home that night and just cry and think like, what, how, like I'm young. Arthritis is something that old people get. It's not like I'm young. Like I said, I thought I was fit and healthy, but it turns out that that wasn't actually the case. And so I think I'm pretty grateful for where my mindset was at the time, and the fact that I'd already kind of started this personal development journey, so to speak, because literally the next day I just woke up and, excuse my French, but I just thought, fuck that. Like, this is not how my life is going to look. Like, it just can't be. And that was when the journey started.
So literally the next day. So there was no downtime. There was no wallowing.
I mean, I took a night.
You took a night. I mean, that's not bad. That's not bad. And like you said, when you hear arthritis and you think of an age and stage in someone's life, and for anybody who doesn't know what rheumatoid arthritis is, what is it and how can it impact you kind of on the whole?
Yeah, sorry, I should have said that. So rheumatoid arthritis is different from osteoarthritis, which is what people tend to get when they're older, because it's like wear and tear basically of your joints. Yeah. But rheumatoid arthritis isn't wear and tear. It's actually an autoimmune disease. So it's where your body actually starts to attack itself. Like there's different autoimmune diseases, like Crohn's disease, for an example, but there your body attacks your gut. Whereas with rheumatoid arthritis, your body attacks your joints, typically. And it's painful. I couldn't walk down a set of stairs. Like walking up was fine, but I couldn't walk down. It felt like my knees were just going to burst. It was like there was just this intense like fire in my joints. And I didn't actually realize the seriousness of the situation with that. Like I know that sounds quite serious, but I had lots of like niggles and like different parts, like my knees, my ankles, my hips. But I was in the middle of doing two hiking endurance challenges. So they were like 24-hour hikes. I was at the gym 5 times a week doing strength training, and I was going out running. I was spending every weekend on a Monroe somewhere. And so I just kept putting these niggles down to like obvious fatigue because of my training schedule being so intense, and just like, yeah, basically just that. I just thought, once this next event is past, I'll take a rest and I'll be fine. And I was getting acupuncture at the time because before my second event, my ankle was really hurting. And I thought, I'm never going to be able to do this event if I'm in this much pain. So I got a last minute acupuncture appointment and then started seeing him every week. And I was like, oh, like I've got the same pain now in my finger. And he was like, well, that's not from training. Like you're not doing anything with your finger. So he was like, I really think you should go and get that checked out. Like you need to go to the doctor and get bloods. And thankfully he did, and he pushed me, because the next week he was like, have you done that yet? I was like, no, like it's not that big a deal. And he was like, no, you really need to go and do that. And I did, and that's when it showed up that I had RA. So I'm grateful for the series of events that happened, because I caught it very quickly and very early, because the longer it takes to get the diagnosis, the more permanent damage can be done in the joints. But I was very fortunate.
Wow. I mean, and just thinking about even the lead up to that, it was, I mean, if he hadn't said anything,
Mm-hmm.
And if he was kind of just there doing the job, getting it done, see you next week, Jasmine, what might have happened? There's a lot of what ifs in the things, and
there is a lot of what ifs. And another one where I feel immensely grateful for too was the timing of it, because I literally got the diagnosis pretty much right before lockdown started.
Right, okay.
And so my follow-up appointment with the specialist was pushed back because everything got cancelled. And so that really gave me the extra time to do all of the things that I was trying and put things in place and whatever. Had I not had that, had I had my specialist appointment sooner, I would have probably been like, oh, well, there's not that much improvement. Like, give me whatever you need to give me. However, I did have that longer opportunity, which if it didn't happen when and how it happened, I wouldn't have had the privilege.
So, I mean, it seemed to be, ironically, that perfect storm then of,
Exactly.
for an opportunity to really focus on your well-being in relation to time and lockdown, but also that time for healing, to investigate some of the alternative approaches.
Yeah, and because it was locked down too, like there wasn't, apart from work, there was nothing else to really focus on. So it did really give me that opportunity to slow down, because I was very, like, my schedule was always packed before that, and then it just suddenly emptied. So I could focus on me, I could focus on my health. And that let me see just actually how much of a priority it needs to be.
Yeah. And just on the basis of now and here and now, how are you in your wellness? Where are you?
Yeah, I'm good. So I don't get any pain, any symptoms. The only time I've experienced a symptom was when I had COVID. And then my hips, like I just got this intense pain in my hips for like 24 hours where I couldn't stand, I couldn't sit, I couldn't lay down, like nothing gave me any sort of relief or comfort. And then I got the flu just at Christmas past, and I got the same again, but that's the only sign or symptom I've had since.
So kind of anything viral will flare it up?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah, that's what I've found.
Yeah. But I suppose, and there'll be people listening to this saying, with possibly rheumatoid arthritis, thinking, Jesus, what have you done and what have you taken? Because I want some.
Yeah.
So if you were to walk somebody through this magic healing process, what was it that worked for you?
Honestly, I tried so much stuff. Like I just threw everything at the wall at once. It would be really difficult for me to pinpoint and say, oh, this was like the magic pill, or this is the one treatment that you need to go and get done. And what I would say in working with other people, like with clients since, is that everyone is different. And although you get the same symptoms, so rheumatoid arthritis is a symptom. It's of something else that's going on inside. And so we might have the same symptoms, but our cause will be most likely different. For me at the time, like stress was a big cause. I was very stressed at the time. Like I said, like I was very busy. I was under a lot of mental stress, but also physical stress with what I was like, how I was training and what I was doing. And so for me, a lot of it, I would just say start with the basics, like work on your sleep, prioritize that, because that's when your body rests and repairs. Like that's a huge one that we underestimate so much because we're so busy and we don't recognize as that being a productive task. stress management is huge. Like, we can't eliminate stress. That's just an impractical thought to have. But recognizing or identifying what your sources of stress are, managing those as best as possible, eliminating the sources that we can, putting in boundaries around the other ones, and then also increasing our resilience to stress. So that could be anything from like breath work, meditation, it could be cold dipping, could be sauna. You have to be careful with like cold dipping, especially if you're already super stressed and like your cortisol levels are high. You don't really want to be pushing them higher, but with that short-term stress of an ice bath. But things like that will help you build your resilience to stress, so that stressful situations won't affect you quite as much. And then stripping your diet back to whole foods, like, that cannot be underestimated enough either. At the time, I was vegan, which I thought like, oh, I've got this vegan label, so that's healthy. I was a junk food vegan. Like, I ate Oreos and thought, oh, they're good because they're vegan.
Yeah.
So really stripping all of that out as much as possible. Again, it's not the most practical to say that you'll never eat another piece of processed food again, but minimizing it as much as humanly possible and being very aware of the foods that you're taking, reducing your toxic load. So looking at things like your deodorant, your cleaning products, what you're using to clean your kitchen or your floors, your washing tablets, like all of these things contribute to the toxic load that builds up in our body, which is basically just the amount of chemicals and toxins that's going around our system at any time. The more we add on to that, we're putting our body under stress again, because it has to work really hard to get rid of those toxins. So looking at ways that we can reduce our exposure to them in the first place, like through the air that we're breathing. If we're in a city, maybe think about an air filter in your house. Through the water that you're drinking, again, think about a water filter. Through, like I mentioned, like personal care products, cleaning products, the candles that you've got in your house, get rid of your candles and your plugins and your air fresheners. Like, they're not necessary and they're not doing you any favors health-wise. So things like that, I would say, are just like basic ways to start. But also, if you've had any autoimmune diagnosis, I would say look at your gut. It was Hippocrates that said, and this quote has always stuck with me, but this is like a quote that's 2,500 years old, that he said that all disease starts in the gut. And I definitely think that is such a huge part of it, if not the explanation for so much. It's that we need to prioritize our gut health. It's where most of your immune system is sitting, up to 70% of it. Like, your serotonin is mostly made in your gut. I think it's 90%. In fact, I know it's
Right.
90% is in your gut. Yeah.
Wow.
So it's got such a big effect on every system on your body, from your mental health to your hormones to your immune system, and everything else in between. Your gut is where it starts. So really get on top of your gut health.
Well, that's fascinating. I mean, I suppose there's a couple of things there for me. The gut thing, the gut health stuff fascinates me. I didn't even know about serotonin, so that's really interesting. But I have heard about, and I've obviously followed your work as well, talking and promoting gut health and gut wealth, and making sure that, we're very aware of what we're doing and what's in our gut. And it sounds like a lot of the stuff that you've said, that awareness of what you're intaking and what the outtake is as well. So is it not like a cheat sheet, but is there a way that people can really kind of get to a real kickstart for gut health, in sense of, here's where you need to start to build on it? And
Yeah.
obviously working with a health coach like yourself who specialises in gut health would be a massive advantage as well.
I would definitely say is like, for a cheat sheet, and you know what? None of these things are sexy. And they're all of the things, I think we get so obsessed with making things so much more complicated than they need to be in every sense, but especially with our health. So we think that we're feeling low on energy, our gut health isn't good, we're being diagnosed with XYZ, we might have eczema, psoriasis, like we're feeling so low on energy, our sleep is rubbish, like we've got insomnia, all of these things, and we're like, oh, we need to go and fly off to Thailand for a week's retreat, or we need to go and book into this health clinic and just get every drip imaginable, or like I need drips, I need all of these supplements, like I need a bucket load of supplements to help fix this. And it's just not necessary. Like, get back to basics. Make sure you're drinking enough water. The amount of clients that start with me that I'm like, how are you not dead? Because you're like, you must be so dehydrated, drinking only like 1 glass of water a day. Like, get on top of that. Make sure your hydration is up there. Like I said, strip it back with whole foods. Make sure that you're getting enough fruit and vegetables and enough fiber in your diet. Like, that's really important. And a big source of that is fruit and vegetables. Make sure you've got variety in your diet. Be getting food, like your proteins from like beans and legumes, as well as good quality meats. Go for organic where you can. I know it's more expensive, but there are ways around that. There's a Clean 15 Dirty Dozen list that's produced by the EWG every year, and they highlight like the top 15, no, sorry, the top 12 foods that you would most want to buy organic, and then they list 15 that you could buy conventional. So if you're on, like, if we're all watching our budgets right now, just try and focus on that Dirty Dozen and try and buy those organic. Try and buy good quality meats. Go to your local butcher if you can. Get free range eggs, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And really pay attention to, just start reading the labels. Start paying attention to what you're putting into your body, because just because you can buy it in a supermarket doesn't mean it's safe. I think one of the biggest misconceptions that we have is that I know I don't want to go into conspiracy theories, but like that the government, I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that we think that the government and that these like big pharma and the big food corporations have our best interests at heart. And that couldn't be further from the truth. And we can tell that straight away as soon as you walk into a supermarket and go and buy something that just off the shelf, because it's going to be filled with so much chemicals. Now, not every product, but you will be able to find them very easily. Your shopping cart will probably be full of the majority of them. Chemicals which are really toxic to your body. And if you just have it as a one-off occasion, it's not going to cause you much problems. If you have it here and there, it's not going to cause you much problems. But the problem is that we don't know this. And so we're eating it breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and snacks in between. We're drinking it in our water. We're like, when we're adding squash or flavoring or whatever to it, or we're drinking fizzy juice or whatever, we're coming into contact with these chemicals way too much, and our bodies just can't handle it because they're not meant to be inside of us. We're not meant to ingest it. So I think that's a big thing to focus on, and also start looking at what you're consuming out with food, because it doesn't just stop there. When I mean consumption, like I mentioned already, like personal care products, everything that you put in your skin, 70% of it you absorb. So I've got a personal rule of thumb that if I can't eat it, I'm not going to use it on my body. And now I'm not going to go and eat my soap, but I could if I wanted, and it's not going to cause me any harm.
Yeah.
Like things like that, shampoos, makeup, deodorant, everything that you allow to touch your skin. And like perfumes, I just wouldn't use anymore at all. If a product's got perfume or fragrance in it, I just steer far away from it. But also, like I mentioned before too, is like stress management, because health is holistic. We can't just look at health and say we need to improve things physically, because unless we're in line with like our mental and emotional health as well, if we're out of balance there, our physical health is not going to follow. And likewise, if our physical health is out of balance, our mental and our emotional health is not going to follow either. Like, we need to look at ourselves as a whole being and not just try and like systemize different parts, because it just doesn't work that way.
And I totally agree with you on that, Jasmine, because I know as a therapist, a lot of the work that, when I'm working with clients and they're going through sometimes emotional distress and heightened distress, I will always talk to them about the physical stuff as well. So I'll talk about, again, water intake, how much water do you take, any consumption of drugs, alcohol, or prescription or non-prescription, and all that type of stuff. But as if we can manage the intake, and even stuff like, are you physical? I'm not saying are you like doing one rows, but how much are you walking? How many steps are you doing? How active are you, to the point of, like you say, strip it back to the basics. Let's not make it overly complicated. But what we know is if you're more active, you will feel better, and your confidence and self-esteem will go up, which means you will be less stressed. And all of this has a part to play. So it is holistic, and it is really important that we get that sense that, as a psychotherapist, I think there's that misconception that people think that I just focus on the psychology and the mind of it. But if the body's not working in conjunction, then it's not all going to sync up. So we're out of balance.
Yeah. Love that you've just said that. Love that you've just said that. And even like there's so much that I could go into what you've just said as well, but I really love the focus that you place on not just the mind, but also the body in it. Because I think that that is super important. Even if you, like you said, like it's like the things you mentioned, if you are getting out more, if you're moving more, if especially if you're able to get into nature when you're increasing your steps every day, if you're able to walk through green space, like we know how much of a benefit that has on our cortisol levels and essentially our mood and how we feel. If we're able to do that and we feel less stressed, we feel a bit better, we're more motivated to go and make dinner and make some healthy choices,
Yeah.
rather than try and find that kind of dopamine hit from ice cream or from some other delicious confectionery.
I know, and it's so true though. And like you say, I mean, I'm not sitting here professing like I eat healthy and I drink healthy, but I certainly have been trying a lot more recently. One, because of my age and stage. You know, when you hit your 40s, you have this massive realization in your life that, you know, you're in the second half. Do you know what I mean? You're playing in the second half. So I am more conscious, and I think, you know, after making some bad choices in life around food and intake and exercise, and it is about making the small adjustments now that will make the
Mm-hmm.
big changes long term. So,
Yeah.
and I hear you saying that, you know, if we focus on stripping it back, and it is about that. I don't think, and this isn't just for obviously for people with rheumatoid arthritis. This is just in general.
Yeah. It's applicable to everyone. We all
Yeah,
need a little bit more focus on ourselves and our health, because I think we get so busy and we get so caught up in trying to save time because we've got so much commitments here, there, and everywhere between work and family and trying to be social too. Like it's exhausting. There's so much to do. And I think that we tend to deprioritize ourselves and our health in the process. And in actual fact, in doing that, we're costing ourselves more time. This is something that I try and like say to people who give me that, oh, I'm too busy reason why I can't do X, Y, Z.
yeah.
I'm like, well, if you don't take 20 minutes to go and prepare something for your dinner tonight that is reasonably healthy, you're going to cost yourself years in the future. So like, how can you say you don't have time? You're not going to have time if you keep doing what you're doing, because you're literally shaving years off the end of your life.
Totally. And you're right, you know, there's points there that you could make 20-minute meals. I mean people like Joe Wicks and Jamie Oliver and all these people, 15-minute meals. All their chefs are available, I'm sure, as well, who do. It's not an endorsement, but you know, these people are there who do create these meals that are pretty much freshly made. So there's ideas there if you can't. But you know, I was thinking about when you were talking about and you know going shopping and finding the right foods and that type of thing. And this maybe exists and it maybe doesn't. It's maybe a venture you and I can get into in a business. Is that do you know how if you look at MyFitnessPal and your Fitbit and stuff, and you can scan a barcode or you can scan. So is there something out there that will really tell us what toxins exist in certain foods or what, so that, you know, because I mean, for me, I wouldn't know. I would go into a shop and assume that that looks healthy. It's fruit, it's veg, but I don't really look into, you know, where was it grown? Was there a pesticide used? Was there this or that? So is there something that exists in the world yet that does that?
Unfortunately, yes, or I would have been down
Yeah.
for the business idea. But fortunately, also that
Fortunately.
there's two really good apps that I use. One of them is called Yucca. It's Yuka, and it's mostly like food based. So you could like, I'll just warn you before you download this that you will become obsessive. And the
Right.
day that you download it, block off a few hours to go through your entire kitchen pantry, because it gets very addictive. But you can scan food. You can also scan like your shampoo as well. And it gives things a rating out of 100 products. And it will give you like a traffic light system. So it'll give you like this is why we scored it this way. And like you've got 6 chemicals that are red. And then you can go into that and it'll tell you the chemical, and also if it's like carcinogenic or if it's an endocrine disruptor or whatever it is. And then it will tell you a little bit, it'll give you like a bit of background as to why it's in the food, like what's the purpose of the ingredient, where it came from, whatever. So that's actually really helpful to start building your knowledge. Another one is Think Dirty. which I kind of use as like a backup app. So that's got more of a bigger database of products, like personal care, cleaning products, but it does
Okay.
still have some food as well. So I use two of them, and I tend to find that a product will be on one or the other. But as a rule of thumb, even if you don't have access to that, or if you just don't want to bother with an app, is just to look at food. And if you can't pronounce what's on it, or if you can't say, right, I'm in the sauces aisle, and if I looked at this ingredient list, I could go in the next aisle and buy that thing. Like,
Yeah.
if you can't, then put it back on the shelf. Because
Yeah.
if the ingredient is not readily available to buy in the supermarket, it's most likely a chemical, and it's most likely not going to be good for your health.
That's a good tip. That's a good tip. I'll make sure I'm doing that in the future. So, I mean, all of the stuff that you've said and all of the stuff I've heard and followed is so interesting. I think there needs to be a lot more about this. I know obviously you're getting clients and you coach people through their gut health and their well-being, and from what I can see, you're very busy. But you seem like I mean, to jump from getting a really serious diagnosis to the next day going, fuck this, I'm getting all over this, is there's a really deep-seated resilience there and determination. And I'm just wondering if, where that comes from, because I know from from my approach and as a therapist, what I will often consider as, well, this adult must have learned this somewhere in childhood because this is where it's evolved from, or what happened that they had to overcome certain things to actually understand how to do this in one day to
Mm.
turn it around. So now that we know a lot about you and a lot about the here and now, and what you've done and the amazing stuff that you do, what if we went back the ways and said, right,
Mm.
well, to know who you are today will dictate who you were as a child, and the experiences you had as a child. So who was wee Jasmine? What was life like for wee Jasmine that brought her here?
So I had a great childhood in that, and I think I was exposed to things in my childhood that made my brain think there is an alternative. In that, like, I grew up on a farm. I was always outside. I was always knee deep in dirt. Like, honestly, if I had kids, that's how I'd want them to grow up too. So I had a very much awareness of where food comes from, like connection with animals. And I think that for me, I was very lucky. Like, I lived next door to my grandparents, but both sets always were like growing their own fruits and vegetables. They were making jams. They were making like their own pickled beetroot. Like, so I had a lot of that kind of like whole food upbringing. And also my grandfather, he had a holistic health food store when I was young. So that was like, you went into the shop and there was just barrels. You didn't have to buy a pack of flour. You could buy the exact amount of flour that you needed. Like, there was
Right.
all of these like alternative kind of medicines and supplementations and like all of that kind of goodness. So I grew up with that kind of environment. Like, my mum was quite holistic when she looked at things. So I had almost like that background or that like piece of knowledge where I thought like something exists other than like normal Western medicine
Yeah.
and like typical Western ways of convenience living, shall we say.
Mhm.
So I think I had that awareness and that knowledge, quite basic though, from childhood. But in terms of the resilience, I actually think that probably the majority of that came from later in life, like past childhood. I would say that kind of started from adult, like late teenage years, adulthood. And I think, like I said, like I'd already started that kind of personal development journey at that point because I hit rock bottom, or like at least what was rock bottom for me. And I'd done things, I'd learned tools, I'd put things in place, I'd got myself out of that, or off the bottom, shall we say, and everything that I was learning along the way definitely contributed to having that mindset of being like, no, like we're gonna take control. And I think, like I said, I was doing endurance events and stuff at the time as well, which really gave me a lot of mental strength and mental resilience, to be able to take something like that on board and deal with it the way I did.
Yeah. Because it does. It sounds like a real, I mean, it's a life learning really when you're talking about, I mean, even talking about your granddad and having that holistic shop, you don't have to buy a certain amount, you buy what you need. But it's very much of that kind of, natural remedy, natural care. It's something that if you need it, you use it. And when it was all done with genuineness and care, and even like growing up on the farm as well, understanding of health, of fruit, of veg, of animals, and the right type of food to eat. And so it sounds like what happened for you growing up maybe led into a lot of the stuff that you're talking about today.
Yeah, very
And
grateful for the childhood that I had for sure.
yeah, I mean, because I'm wondering if it was anybody else that didn't have that childhood and didn't have that upbringing around that holistic kind of well-being around food and alternative medicines even, which isn't something that was very readily available at all. It was very much you get what you want from the GP and that's it.
Yeah. And what I found actually through conversations that I've had with my mum that I never realized, but like when we were kids, she like never put shoes on us until we were walking because that obviously impacts the growth of a child's foot. She like never gave us sugar. She never, and I was like, wait, what? I was like, really? You did all that as a kid? Like when we were kids, and I had no idea that we were really getting that from when we were born.
So literally from birth, it was about preparing you for your fullest potential. It sounds like,
Mm,
and that that was what your mom was thinking about in relation to your physical development as well.
yeah. And it was something I never really appreciated when I was a kid, to be honest. Like,
Yeah,
even though I look back now and I say I loved my childhood, and I did love it at the time, but I also didn't like that I was on a farm, so we were kind of on the outskirts of town. All of my friends were in the middle of town, and they
yeah,
could just like cycle to each other's houses and go and play in the street, and I couldn't do that. And I was like, always felt like I was like missing out to a certain extent, but I wasn't really
yeah,
because my parents were amazing also. Like they shuttled us about. They must have been on the road every single day, multiple times a day, taking
yeah.
us in and out of the middle of town. And it's not like we lived that far away, but it was on a main road, so we couldn't, as kids, really walk that distance. Um, so yeah, probably there was times in my childhood when I was like, I want to live in the middle of town and I don't want my dad to be a farmer. But I'm very grateful for it now.
Grateful for it now because, and I think that's whenever you're thinking of it with your adult brain, when you're
Hmm.
thinking about it with your child brain, you want to socialize. We're social animals, so we need to be socializing, we need to be integrating, we need to be building those bonds and that network. And if that's, if everybody's made this connection at school or whatever, and then you're having to detach yourself again until the next day while everybody else is continuing that connection, there is a difficulty there, and like you say, in hindsight, with your adult brain, but in childhood, there will have been difficult points, I'm sure, where you maybe had a few blazing arguments. I don't want to be here and stamping your feet, maybe.
Perhaps, yeah. But at the same time, like I loved being able to take my friends to my house and be like, come and
Yeah.
see the cows, come
Aye.
and watch them being milked.
So there's a real novelty there as well.
Hmm.
And was that like, I mean, were you on the farm right up to what was your teenage years like? Did you kind of be able to kind of travel more and socialize and
Yeah, 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 definitely. As I became like a teenager, obviously, like that main road wasn't so dangerous anymore, so it was very easy to get about. And my parents were still very good at like shuttling us around. I mean, they still do, but yeah, it was definitely like we still lived on the farm. The farm changed, like it didn't have the animals and stuff after I think I was 15. But I still lived there until I was like 24. I moved away from the farm, so it was still in the same kind of environment.
okay? And what was stuff like high school for you like? Because I know that's the sometimes a difficult rite of passage in our
Mm.
lives, and sometimes that can determine what our resilience and how we manage stresses and our mental well-being as well. Do you know if we go through what we know from working with young people is that there are so many different challenges in our teenage years and our mental well-being and was what was that period in your life like before you went into your accountancy job and in your 20s and stuff?
If you'd projected my life from, I don't know, I think we call it fourth year. I don't know what that like equates to for England and the rest of the country, but where I grew up, it was fourth year. If you tried to project my life from me at that stage, you wouldn't have seen. It would have been bleak. It wouldn't have been very optimistic. I was a very angry teenager, very resentful. My parents got divorced, and yeah, I didn't love life at that point at all. Like, I was very grateful for my friends because they were my escape, but ultimately I was very angry, and I think that translated through at school too. Like, I didn't apply myself. Like physics class, I think in my whole last year of school, I probably attended half a dozen times. Like, I didn't even turn up to the exam. Yeah, I probably wasn't the best student to teach on reflection at all. And just like, I look at that time and I think how different my life was then, and like how different I was then compared to what happened. Like, I left school at 15. I was an early leaver. I started school at 4. So I could leave, like, my schooling was finished basically at 15. So I got special permission to leave school on the basis that I had to go into further education. I couldn't just leave and do nothing.
Yeah.
And I remember just getting a prospectus sent out to me, and I had no clue what I wanted to do. I just knew I wanted to leave school. I knew I hated it. And I remember my guidance teacher, she convinced me to stay on because I'd initially said I wanted to leave. She convinced me to stay on. So
Yeah.
I did. And I can't remember, I was 1 week or 2 weeks into it. And I went to her, like, out of class, and I was like, I can't do this. And she was like, I expected that. She was like, here's the form, go get your teachers to sign it. Got the prospectus for college, and I literally just flicked through it, came to a page that said beauty therapy. And I was like, that sounds all right. Let's apply for that one.
Yeah.
And I absolutely loved it. I did 2 years. I got student of the year and commendable student. I had basically full attendance, like, compared to the last years at school. And I really just thrived. I really felt like I was understood. I was seen. I was spoken to I was treated like an adult and not a kid.
Yeah.
And yeah, I really enjoyed it. And so that's where my career started, was actually as a beauty therapist.
Right. So do you think that's what the shift was in your behaviour because of how you were responded to and treated as well within the college?
Absolutely. And I was doing something interesting, something that I thought was exciting. And there was so much different parts of it that I was learning. And I think it's a misconception of that kind of industry too, in that, like, there's not really much to learn, but you learn so much about the body, you learn so much, like, anatomy, physiology, and health. And you essentially have to be a therapist to your clients to some degree. I remember, like, after a full day's work, just being drained because people just come in and you share such intimate moments with them. It's a strange dynamic, but people feel like they can open up to you. And so you take that, but I loved it. I loved working with people. I loved the variety of things I was doing in my day. And like I said, it interested me. Whereas, like, physics and geography and maths just didn't really interest me at all.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. So the beauty therapy industry, among others, I feel really do need part of the training within that industry is about listening skills, and how they support people. Because I think it's really hard for people in that industry and other industries where they work with clients on a regular basis, they see them on a regular basis, the clients open up to them, but then that beauty therapist or hairdresser or whatever has nowhere to take that, to dump it.
Mm-mm.
You know, it's like, shit, what do I do with this now? Like, she told me she's getting divorced and her man's cheating on her. This one, she's chucking her veins out. And you're thinking, what am I supposed to do with this information?
Yeah.
So,
It's a lot. It is. It's intense. I remember at the time, like, one of my friends, she actually worked in an office, but we would just hang out at night, and I'd be like, I've got no words left today. Like, I've used my capacity, and she'd be the same, and we'd just sit in silence with each other, and it was fine. Like, it was a very low maintenance friendship, and it was great because I literally did. Sometimes I would finish at 5, and I'd be like, I've got nothing left.
you've totally zapped your social battery.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. And then you went from there. How did you go from beauty therapy to accountancy?
So I liked the arithmetic of my job doing beauty. Like when I had to like add people's treatments up in my head if they were buying products, I was doing that. And I know that that's really high level, but I was like, actually, I quite like numbers. And I remember thinking like, so I was working full time. I was doing really well. I had such a like regular client base and I was always full. I went out on my own, started my own business. And it was kind of like, right, there's nowhere else to go. This is like, I was 18 and felt like I kind of was at max potential on it. Other than like starting my own like bricks and mortar business, I was kind of as far as I could go. So it was like, right, what's next? I love this. I enjoy this. I love my clients, but my brain needs something a little bit more now.
Yeah.
And so the numbers part just kept like sticking with me. And I obviously, because I left school at 15, I didn't have any hires. So I couldn't just go to university. I had to go through, I did a 2+2 route through college first to get my HND, and then I went into third year of university. And that's where it started. And so I ran the business while I went back, still like, well, went into college full time and then eventually uni as well. I was doing like a 3-hour commute to get to uni every day, plus running the business on top of that was like 2 full-time jobs. And then I started an office job as well to get experience on my CV. So I've always been a pretty busy person. But that was how the accountancy started.
And doing basically 3 jobs to keep that going.
Yeah.
Do you
And
feel
it
like you
was,
always need to be busy? Because everything you talk about, you always sound, but you sound like you relish in it, you know, you enjoy that busyness.
I recognized that stress was my emotional home. Like I needed the busyness because I loved it. I definitely relished in it. But it did come to a point where I recognized that like I would put so much pressure on myself to always be doing. And I recognized that, yes, stress was my emotional home. I didn't know how to be in a different state or how to be quiet, or how to, like, I couldn't sit in a bath because like, what do you do? I remember once that I lived with my grandma for a few years and she had like this amazing bath. And I was like, I'm going to pour myself a bath. I'm going to put on a candle. I'm going to get a magazine. Took me ages to fill the bath because it was bigger than the water tank. Sat in it and I was like, what now? Oh, I suppose I'll just get out then. Because I just couldn't sit still.
Yeah.
So that was definitely a process for me too, to like recognize that pattern and get out of it. And the reason I had to recognize that pattern was eventually burnout, which obviously is going to come from that when you're in that stress, like fight or flight state for.
Yeah. And do you feel like, did you hit burnout? Did you experience that?
I was pretty close to it, yeah. Because when I was working full time as an accountant, after I graduated from university, I did my chartership. But you can only do that while you work, or you can't only do it, but that's how most people do it, is you work full time to get your hours of evidence that you can do the job, and then you do your exams on top of that, and they are freaking intense. And it was through those, because I basically gave up my social life for the 3 months before every exam, and there was a lot of exams to get through. So yeah, it was from that I recognized that like I was always just super stressed and like just had this pressure of an exam over my head once every 6 months. But for I'd get 3 months of a break and then it'd be straight back into it again. So that was pretty intense. And that was where I really recognized that this kind of like busyness was an issue, because on that 3-month break where I wasn't studying, I was jam packing my calendar. Like I was at a networking event, I was at social things, like I was never in.
So, and I think you hear that from a lot of people like yourself and myself who, like you, I was going to say I need to be busy. I don't need to be busy. I like to be busy because I feel like everything I do needs to be productive. You know, that downtime is a waste of time. You know, and there's a strange irony in that coming from a therapist. So, but there's that. But when you start to realize that, and you know, you obviously got to that point, you know, are very much on the cusp of it. And then is that then when we kind of do full circle and we come back to your health and the diagnosis?
So I was a bit When did I qualify? I qualified in 2017, so I would have had a few years in between fully qualifying and getting the diagnosis. And I probably didn't become any less busier. I wasn't doing exams, but I was definitely filling my time with other things that I enjoyed, but there was just a lot of it. Uh, yeah, it's been a process.
It always is. It
Yeah.
always is. So you went into the corporate world, go around, and you kind of you talked about your diagnosis during lockdown with all the wellness stuff and all the stuff you've done to take care of yourself and all the natural medicines that you eventually threw enough mud at the wall to see if it would stick, and a few things
Mhm.
stuck and a few things didn't, and it worked. And here you are now, and the here and now. Tell me about what's happening for you, because there's lots of stuff happening for you because I can see it. So what's happening for you that's exciting now, and what's your plans going forward? Because I imagine the world of coaching, but particularly around the health stuff that you do,
Mhm.
it's going to be so instrumental going forward in the future.
Yes. So, obviously, right now I'm working with one-to-one clients. I'm doing that while I travel as much as possible. Like you said, I'm not in the country. I'm in Austria right now. I've just came from a month in Mexico, which was just incredible, and I loved it. But there, a new project was born with me and one of my best friends, who is also a coach. She's an amazing coach in herself. So we've started a podcast. We've just launched that last month. So that's one of the new projects that I've got going on.
Brilliant.
We've also got something else in the works together, which will be coming up once we kind of get into the rhythm of the podcast. I've also got so I'm working one-to-one. I'm launching a group program at the end of this month as well. So I'm doing like a guided fast for over the course of a month, like putting things in place and um, getting into the way of doing preparation for a fast and then integration afterwards. So that's
Right.
also very exciting. So there's a lot going on with work just now.
Wow. So lots of exciting stuff happening, lots of exciting stuff coming up as well. And I did say to you, I have seen your podcast advertised. I'm going to go and listen to it today after we finish. So I know it's early stages, but it looks interesting and exciting, and I'm looking forward to hearing this kind of drop of the other project within it as well. So that's a nice teaser to keep listening. And what's that podcast based around? Give me a wee bit of a kind of, for anybody that's listening.
So we want to just make it super casual. And the reason that we kind of initially thought of doing this is because when we talk with each other, we have very deep conversations. And there's so much times where we've gone, oh, we should have recorded that. That would have been great. Or it'll give us an idea for content to write,
Yeah.
or emails to write. So we just thought, you know what, we're just going to start harnessing that, and we're just going to record. Like when we were in Mexico together, it was very easy. We'd be walking back from the gym and we'd be talking about something about ourselves, and we'd be like, "Oh, that would actually be really powerful of like to talk about that on something like a podcast." And so it's just our bestie conversations, but we're using it with the hope or the intention of talking about things, all things life, relationships, personal development, personal growth, health, well-being, and from our perspectives, from our experiences, and just in the hope that if somebody listens to it and can resonate or can recognize a little part of themselves and hear how we've overcome the thing, or hear what we're currently doing and what we're sitting in. So that's the intention, is this like that, in the hope that it helps the people that listen to it get some value from it.
Brilliant. Brilliant. It sounds amazing. And I think it'll be really helpful for a lot of people if they're listening to that and finding some wee gems in there, hopefully that they can take away. And some of both of your knowledge as well, and skills to actually take away as well as excellent coaches.
Yeah.
So finally, Jasmine, I just want to say thanks for coming on. There's a bit of a closing tradition and reflection on this podcast. So what I tend to ask people at the end is if they could think about, everything that they've experienced and all the stuff we talked about, and if there was one thing that stood out in all that helped you take back control, what was that and why?
That helps me take back control of like something that I've experienced in my life.
Yeah, that was difficult.
Oh, that's a good question. I would say therapy. So,
Okay.
like I said, at that point where I hit rock bottom, I didn't know what was wrong with me. I just had a very low mood. I was having panic attacks very regularly. I knew that something was off. I just didn't know what it was. And I remember going to the doctor and being like, I don't know what I need, but I need something. And he was like, are you sleeping? I was like, no. And he's like, okay, we'll give you sleeping pills. I was like, well, I just feel like I need to talk to someone. And he was like, well, do you need to get signed off from work then? I was like, well, no, that's not really going to help, because that's just going to make me feel like I'm failing and that I can't overcome this. Like, if it's affecting my work, I was like, I don't really want that. And he was like, okay, we'll give you antidepressants. And I was like, well, you're not really listening. I just want to talk to somebody. Like, I don't just want that either. And he honestly just like rolled his chair back and looked at me and he was like, I don't know what to do with you then. I was like, well, this is helpful. And then he Googled a mental health charity, a local mental health charity, wrote the phone number down on a Post-it note and just put me out the door. And I was like, okay. So, and at that point, I didn't really know how to find a therapist. I didn't know if it was therapy that I needed. I didn't know who I needed to talk. I tried to Google it and it was just like all of this information came back and I was like, I don't know what's wrong with me, to see what I like. How do I find the person that's going to be able to help? And thankfully, I was speaking to someone that I worked with at the time and she was like, I know a therapist and she's local and like, go try her out. And so I did, and it was honestly one of the best things I've ever done. Like, it really was one of the best things I've ever done. And like the tools and techniques that I learned through that process, I still use today. And that was nearly 10 years ago, 9 years ago now. And so I think for me, like that, I think everybody should get therapy, because you can't nobody can sit here and say that they've not got something that they need to talk about. And so I think that should be like part of schooling, because we're not told how to recognize our own mental health or recognize our own minds and see what impact the things that we do has on it. And so I think like, yeah, if we could change the schooling system, I think that would be ideal. But other than that, I think everyone should go and see a therapist, even if it's just a few sessions, because there's going to be something that needs worked through. And I think that I honestly changed my life.
Yeah. It's really nice to hear somebody saying that, because, I'm definitely of the mindset that I think the American model, they have it pretty right in relation to therapy. So, most Americans, again, affordability, but if they can afford it, they have a dentist, they have a doctor, they have a therapist. And it's not about reactive, it's about proactive. They go because they know it's like going to the dentist. I don't go because I wait because I need to get my tooth out. I go to look after my teeth so I don't have to get my teeth out. So how do we do that work in all of our well-being, the stuff that you're doing, talking about gut health and everything that is related to gut and mental health? How do we do that preventative stuff so that we're going and we're using the apps to scan and making sure that we're not taking in any kind of toxic things into our body or our mind?
Yeah.
If it's there, what do we do about it and how do we prevent it from getting there? So it's lovely to hear that feedback. It's nice to hear that you had a positive experience in therapy and you're an advocate for it.
Yeah. 100%. And again, I love how you've just described that. Like, comparing that to a dentist, I think is actually the perfect way to think of therapy. And that you don't necessarily, you go to the dentist every 6 months, even when nothing's wrong. So why aren't we doing the same with our mental health?
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. You're preaching to the converted here, Jasmine. Well, listen, thanks very much for taking the time. I know, like you said, you're in Austria. You've gifted me some time, and I really appreciate it. So thanks for joining me in session, and hopefully we can chat again sometime.
Yes. Thank you very much for having me. It's been fun. I really enjoyed this.
Me too. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us on this episode of In Session Taking Back Control. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with anyone who might benefit from our discussions. For more resources and support, please visit us at Better You, and don't forget to tune in for another inspiring conversation. Until next time, take care and take back control.